The Diocese of Paisley podcast comes to you today from Saint Mirin's Cathedral in Paisley, where a special Mass is taking place for the late Pope Francis. People from across the diocese have flocked to hear Bishop John Keenan say Mass for the happy repose of the soul of Pope Francis. We wanted to catch up with those heading into Mass to hear the thoughts and stories about the late Pope. Here's what they had to say.
I'm Geraldine Warner and I belong to the parish of St Thomas's in Neilston. I was sad. It was expected, but even although it's expected, it's still a shock when you hear it. We were actually in church about to pray the rosary just before Mass, and someone came in and told us they'd heard it on the radio in the car on the way in. So it just changed the whole complexion of Mass on Easter Monday morning. So yes, it's sad, and I'm looking forward to going to Rome later on in the year for my pilgrimage, which is part of the diocesan pilgrimage. So it'll be very interesting. Well, what came across to me was his humility, and the way right from the beginning he didn't want to live in the palace, he wanted to live more among the people, and just his whole attitude was just one of humility and trying to be Christ-like in his approach to everything, which I know all popes aim, that's they're in the steps, following in the steps of St Peter, but he just appeared to be much more in touch with ordinary people.
My name is Louis Pirotti, and I'm Saint Mirin's Cathedral parish. Sad. First thought is sadness. Second thought is a man who's has no problem. He knows where he's going. He's a great example to the whole, not only the parish, the whole world, in actual fact. The type his things he's done, the people he's cared for, is definitely a lesson for us all. Well, he's interviewed, he always comes over as a very humble man, as we all should be. He doesn't overplay the fact that he is the Pope and the top Catholic in the world, which I think he is. And he cares for the poor people, he always has done. And also is trying to bring peace to the world in the places he's been to. Just, it's a shame we don't all think the same way as he does. I've seen 6 popes in my time. Pius XII, and after him John Paul the 23rd, and then Paul VI, and then John Paul I, John Paul II, and our present Pope, ex-Pope, yes. In person.
Paul and Josephine McGrotty were members in St Mirin's Cathedral. Very sad, but not surprised, obviously. We did think it would have happened a few weeks ago, so it was probably very fitting that it was at Easter time is when it happened. And we were in Rome a few weeks ago when he was in hospital, and it was very emotional. It was an emotional weekend that we had in Rome, and we're going back again in October. So it's a very sad time.
We went to Rome in February, and the whole of Rome was very, very sad. There were some places that we had visited where we had been before, and actually one of the restaurant owners gave us a calendar with it was all Pope Francis that was in it, so I think there was a kind of expectation at that time and a great sadness, but I do think it's very, very fitting that it's happened and everything's in place for a beautiful funeral. And we actually went to the church that he's going to be buried in, so it means a lot to us.
I think he was a man of the people. He was
very
very humble and on a par, but not quite on the same level as Pope John Paul II. But I would say, to me, he was a man of the people, and he means a lot to me, and sadly missed. We saw him 2 years ago. Yeah, we've been to Rome on a number of occasions, and we were there for canonisation of Saint Well, my wife's name's Josephine, so it was a Saint Josephine, and we got to see him, and we were there for Mass on the Sunday morning, and within touching distance. It was great.
My name's Margret Docherty. I go to Port Glasgow. I think the Pope was very much for the common person. I think he's done a lot of changes for the church that's brought more people into it, and I'm hoping whoever comes in follows Pope Francis's views, because he's done so much. He was such a humble man, and I think that's what came across with him. Very like Pope John Paul II, as well. So I really did like him, and I'm just hoping that we can give him a good send-off. One thing that's probably not a usual one is when he brought the immigrants over to stay in the Vatican. I mean, I thought that was such an unusual thing for a Pope to do, and it just said his humility, that he just thinks of the common people. He doesn't stay in the normal place, he's quite happy to stay somewhere that's just basic and with no frills, and that was Pope Francis. And I think that's what a lot has to go back to now. It has to go back to basics. And he did. And he was very good with children, very good with anybody. He could talk to anybody, as far as I'm led to believe. He could talk to anybody. But I was never lucky enough to see him in person. I've seen him from a distance, but I've never seen him in person. I'm going to Rome this year to go through the Holy Door. But as I said, I never seen him in person. But when you've seen him on TV or anything like that, or doing any prayers or that, you always felt as if he was speaking to everyone anyway. That was just the way he came across.
My name is Michael. My local parish is Saint Mirin's Cathedral. Obviously very saddened. We said a rosary for him last night, the family, and just it's a very sad time. He was a beautiful Pope, very holy Pope. He was I think his whole pontiff was one of charity, and the one thing that stands out for me is that the synods, the ecumenical, bringing people together, uniting people of all faiths. Even it was all with Pope Francis. It was all about bringing people together in God, and when he was a young man, I loved that he worked among the poorest of the poor, the poorest districts, the slums. He was among the downtrodden, the people on the margins, the periphery of society. He was always reaching out. It was a bit like, I don't mean to be over exaggerating, but he was very sort of Christ-like to me in a lot of ways, in that he sort of cast his net over the sinners. He reached out to sinners, and he was here to help sinners in his pontiff. Always, even when he was a young priest, it was like that. And I said in the synods it was also about bringing people together, uniting people. That's what his whole pontiff was about, and love and the holiness and belief in God. And there's a wee line actually in Psalm 1, the very first Psalm. I think it sums him up in a way. He's like a tree planted by streams of water, who yields its fruit in its season, and its leaf does not wither. I think when you look back in Pope Francis, you'll see that his fruits were beautiful. He yielded beautiful fruits, and so I think that's Pope Francis sums him up. A beautiful Pope, and he was a saint on earth, and I think he will soon be a saint. I think the standout thing for me is the synods, his ecumenical gifts, as I said. That's a standout thing for me over his pontiff, is always uniting people, and the people on the margins, the people, the outcasts, always bringing them in. He was always there for them, and embracing them and giving them hope and faith and love. Well, that's what Jesus did when he was here. I mean, Jesus with the Samaritan, the woman at the well, Jesus brought them in, and he's, with sinners, always bringing sinners. Jesus was here for sinners. That's what he taught. He wasn't here for the virtuous. He was here for sinners. And Francis, his pontiff was a bit like that. His pontiff was here for the downtrodden, the sinners, the marginalised, and bringing them into the fold. think that's about sums it up. He's left a lasting legacy with me in my heart, and I really loved him.
I'm Aileen McCart and I'm from St Mary's in George Street in Paisley, and I just, in some ways, very sad that he has died, but it sounded very peaceful and he deserved it. He deserved a peaceful death. I just think he's left such a strong amount of information, particularly in terms of looking after the very poorest in our society, contrasting the increasing wealth in the world with the increasing poverty. And I think, if nothing else, that's what people will remember him for.
I'm Jim Parker, and we come from St Charles's parish in Paisley. It's very sad, and although we knew it was still a bit of a shock, a bit of a surprise, but he's at peace now. That's the main thing.
He'd been ill for quite a wee while. I think he came through a hard time, but it was unexpected when we saw him actually on television on Easter Sunday, but with the same token, you could see that he had failed quite a bit. Definitely a man for the people, without a doubt, and he wasn't a man that was like a sort of proud man. He was just quite a meek and humble man, I believe, We were at Rome
a few years ago and went to the service at the square. It was lovely, really nice, enjoyed it.
And we saw him when he came round in the Pope-mobile, and
nice.
Unfortunately I was quite tiny and there was this wee man just behind me. He lifted me up so that I could actually see, and he wasn't very much taller than myself, and he lifted me up so that I could get a better view when the Pope-mobile came round. But it was lovely, it was lovely.
Mary Sproule, I stay in Goxton, so I've been in St James's parish. I thought he was great. I think he was more real than any pope that came before him, because he touched the people. And when he lived in Argentina, he went among the favelas and the poorest of the poor, and it was frightening because there were gangsters there that run the show, but he went among them, and he helped the poorest of the poor. And I didn't know, I was watching the television this morning, he phoned Gaza every day, because there's a wee Christian community in Gaza, but he phoned Gaza every day to see how it was. I thought he was a great man, humility, and I like the fact, I've been to the Vatican twice, I like the fact that he never wanted to be very fanciful, and he's no one to be buried in the Vatican, and where he's chosen, it's a wee church, and he never lived in a fancy place in the Vatican. He chose a wee 3 apartment, and maybe that's the measure of the man, and well loved and down to earth and cared, really cared, and I think it's a great thing. He must have known he was come to his end, but he, out there on Easter Sunday, held babies, smiled, he was always smiling. I think he was a wonderful Pope.
I hope you have enjoyed this special podcast, hearing what the people of the Diocese of Paisley will remember most about Pope Francis. Thank you for listening.